I have kept the ledger at Outpost Halvan for 41 years, and in 41 years the number in the last column has not once changed. 0. Every other column moves. Ships sighted, ships approached. Ships that slowed, that hesitated, that turned back with their hulls cold and their crews quiet for a season afterward. But the last column, the one marked "Returned from Beyond the Line," has held at 0 since before my service began, since before my mother's service began, since the first cartographer of my people drew a long curving border around a small yellow star and wrote beside it, in the old hand, "Do not." My name is Veska Oren. I command the watch at Halvan, which is not a fortress, and was never meant to be one. It is an ear. We do not patrol the line. We do not provoke it. We listen, and we record, and we send the record inward to the council, so that no species under our charts forgets what the silence costs. I want to tell you about the morning the signal came, because I have turned it over so many times that the telling has worn smooth, like a stone carried in a coat pocket for years. It came at the dead hour, garbled, half swallowed by the static that lives along the border, the way fog lives along a coastline. A distress call. Not from beyond the line, from just shy of it, from a survey craft that had drifted closer than doctrine allows, while mapping a drift field nobody had bothered to map before. The voice on the recording was young. It said a name, a designation I will not repeat, and then it said something about lights, about movement where no movement should be, and then it said nothing at all. Doctrine is simple. We log it. We do not retrieve. The line exists because retrieval has a long, ugly history of becoming incursion, and incursion has a longer and uglier history of becoming silence. Captain Iron Dasic did not follow doctrine. I want to be fair to him, even now. He was not reckless in the way the old stories like to paint young officers, eager for a medal, deaf to caution. He was thorough. He had read every file in the Halvan archive, every transcript, every withdrawn proposal for a survey mission that the council had quietly buried for 2 centuries. He believed, as a great many capable officers have believed before him, that the line was drawn by caution rather than by certainty, and that caution, examined closely enough, usually turns out to have a seam in it somewhere. He took 4 ships, not warships in the proud sense, survey-armed cruisers, the kind built to skim a hostile moon's atmosphere and come home with samples, not the kind built to fight. He told the post he was completing the recovery the doctrine forbade. He told me, privately, on the comm an hour before he crossed, that he intended to be back inside 3 days with the survey crew's bodies, or their black box, whichever the line allowed him to keep. I told him not to go. It is in the record, my objection, time-stamped, formally entered. It changed nothing, because rank does not always sit where caution does, and Dasic held seniority on this particular doctrine point by 11 months, and a council waiver I had not been informed of until it was too late to matter. 4 ships crossed the line at 0340 by the post clock. I logged the crossing the way I log every crossing, flat and procedural, because procedure is the only thing that has ever kept me steady at this post. Crossed, 4. Time, 0340. Status, nominal. For the first 6 hours, nothing was unusual. We received 2 scheduled check-ins, both brief, both exactly as long as protocol requires, and not a second longer, which is itself a kind of tell, if you have spent long enough listening to officers report from inside hostile territory. Brevity is what fear sounds like when it is trying very hard not to sound like fear. The second check-in mentioned the drift field, mentioned visual contact with structures along its edge. Not wreckage, Dasic was careful to specify. Not wreckage, but structures, standing, intact, arranged with what he called, and I remember the word exactly, because it unsettled me even second-hand, intention. The third check-in did not come. I want you to understand what 6 hours of silence sounds like at a listening post, because it is not the silence of an empty room. It is the silence of a room you know is occupied, where you can hear breathing you cannot place. We ran every diagnostic we had. We confirmed our own receivers were clean. We widened the listening band past anything doctrine requires, on my own authority, because by hour 9 I had stopped believing this was a delay and started believing it was something else, something the post had been built specifically to witness and record rather than to prevent. At hour 14, One of the 4 ships' transponder beacons returned a single automated ping. Not a voice, not a message, just the dumb mechanical handshake a beacon sends when it powers back on after a fault. Coordinates placed it 11 hours burn, deeper into the forbidden sector than Dasic's flight plan had authorized. The ping lasted 4 seconds, and then the beacon went dark again, and never spoke again. I will tell you plainly what I believe, though I cannot prove any of it, and the Council's final report is, by design, a careful document that commits to nothing it cannot verify. I believe the structures Dasic saw were not abandoned. I believe whatever met his ships did not need to chase them, because the drift field itself was already doing the work of a trap, slow and patient and entirely without malice, the way a tide does not hate the swimmer it pulls under. I believe my captain understood, in his last clear minutes, that the caution he had spent his career examining for seams had none, and that the line had never once been drawn by fear of the unknown. It had been drawn by a precise and terrible accounting of outcomes, performed by someone, long before either of us was born, who had watched exactly this happen, and decided that the kindest thing left to do was warn the next ones rather than save them. We listened for 91 days. That is the official figure, and it is accurate, and it tells you nothing about what 91 days of listening to nothing actually feels like in a body. The Council, when the silence had stretched well past any reasonable hope, did not send a relief mission. They reaffirmed the designation. They redrew nothing on the chart, because there was nothing to redraw. The line had already been correct. They sent, instead, an amendment to the Halvan Protocol, 1 line long, which I am required by my post to read aloud to every new officer who arrives here believing, as Dasic believed, that the seam is somewhere in the caution rather than in the universe itself. The amendment says, no retrieval, under any waiver, at any rank, regardless of contact status, regardless of distress signal, regardless of the apparent youth or apparent harmlessness of whatever crosses to meet you on the other side of that decision. I added the last clause myself. The Council let it stand. I still keep the ledger. Crossed, 4. Returned, 0. I have not changed the number, because there is nothing left to enter, and I have come to understand that this is precisely the entry the line was built to produce. Not a battle, not a fleet broken in open space where at least the wreckage could be counted and grieved over, but an absence, total and unremarkable, the kind that does not even leave a debris field to mark where 4 good ships and 40-some lives simply stopped being heard from. New officers ask me, sometimes, late in their first watch, whether I think the humans did it, whether some fleet of theirs came out and met Dasic's ships and ended them the way the old stories like to imagine, with fire and triumph, and a moment some surviving witness could describe. I tell them I do not know, and that not knowing is the entire point. I tell them that a species capable of being seen, capable of leaving a wreck to be found, or a survivor to be questioned, would have given us something to fear in the ordinary way, a face, a weapon, a number we could measure ourselves against. What we were given instead was a closed door with no handle on our side, and a silence so complete it has outlasted 4 ships, 91 days, and 41 years of my listening for an answer that the line itself was built to make sure I would never receive. I do not ask why anymore. I log the crossings. I keep the number at 0, and when my watch ends, I will hand the ledger to whoever takes my chair, and I will tell them only what I was told. Do not.